Welcome to the State of the Market for Law Firm Sales in 11 Minutes. My name is Jeremy Pook and I lead Senior Attorney Match. In today's episode, episode 54, we will have a first of a two-part series on the top 5 mistakes to avoid when considering selling a law firm. We'll have an introduction today, plus go over 2 of the 5 mistakes to avoid and our buzzer beater. So let's jump right into it with our introduction. So for our introduction today, let's look at an overview of the top 5 mistakes to avoid before selling a law firm. Those top 5 mistakes, or the top 5 mistakes to avoid before selling a law firm, consist of the following. First and foremost is not to wait too long to sell. Second is to avoid assuming that your internal successors want to purchase your law firm. Third is to avoid underestimating that Google has become America's greatest referral source for lawyers and law firms post 2020. The fourth mistake to avoid is to overlook converting the subject matter knowledge that you've developed over the course of your careers into digital content for multi-channel digital marketing purposes post 2020. And the fifth of the 5 mistakes to avoid before selling a law firm is to hope that tomorrow will continue to look like today. So now let's look at the first mistake. The first mistake to avoid, that number one mistake to avoid, is waiting too long to sell. So when it comes to the top 5 mistakes to avoid before selling a law firm, mistake number 1 to avoid is to wait too long to sell. Because as more time goes by, the book of business, which is the primary asset of selling attorneys, that is, senior attorneys who have practiced more than 30 years, have developed a book of business over the course of their careers. And what we're seeing in the marketplace is that over time, that book of business is beginning to diminish in value because senior attorneys are not replenishing their books of business in terms of new clients and new referral sources as similarly as they did in yesteryear. And now let's look at why. In 2020, business development for law firms changed forever. That is, that clients, as compared to pre-2020 and really pre-Google, clients previously relied upon word of mouth to ask, who do you recommend for the lawyer to meet a client's given needs? Post 2020, what we continue to see in the marketplace, and the genie is not going in the back in the bottle on this whatsoever, is that new clients, would-be clients, they are searching digitally for lawyers and law firms today. Primarily, they are going to Google. We are calling Google America's greatest referral source for lawyers and law firms. Once they have found law firms and lawyers on Google, they're then looking at the websites of those lawyers and law firms, and then those would-be clients are looking at multiple platforms of social media so that they can learn about lawyers and law firms who they want to hire from the standpoint of know, like, and trust. And those law firms that are generating clients digitally and are investing in multi-channel digital marketing are simply generating more new clients today and tomorrow's tomorrow than lawyers who maintain really a website only approach to digitally attracting new clients. And now let's look at the impact that has on that all important book of business. For those senior attorneys that are waiting too long to sell, by not investing in multi-channel digital marketing and attracting the attention of new clients that want to and are searching for lawyers online, well, those senior attorneys, their books of business are not replenishing as much as yesteryear in terms of clients. And if your client list is not replenishing as much as yesteryear, i.e., that client list is actually decreasing in size, and as senior attorneys' referral sources or retiring, moving away, even passing away by waiting too long, the book of business is becoming less valuable. And what we see in the marketplace is that the primary consideration for sales of law firms and what we call law firm sales 1.0 is that book of business, is the sharing of revenues that are derived from the revenues that come from the books of business of senior attorneys. So for senior attorneys today whose books of business are still in the green, they have clients, they have referral sources, and their books of business have not begun diminishing in value, despite the fact that most senior attorneys are not investing in multi-channel digital marketing. We're recommending that now is the best time to consider selling your law firm. Here we are in the mid 2020s because that window is closing in terms of when is the best time to sell your law practice, because while your practice has clients and referral sources filled in that book of business, as that book of business though may not be replenishing as much as yesteryear, that window of opportunity is starting to close because you're just not going to garner as much consideration from the value of your law firm if your book of business diminishes by not replenishing that all important book of business. So now let's look at mistake number two. Mistake number two to avoid before selling a law firm is to assume that your internal successors want to buy your law firm. And this is something that we see all the time in the marketplace. That is, that senior attorneys, by and large, if they have internal would-be successors, that is, senior associates, junior partners at their firms, they just assume that those attorneys whom they hired at one point want to purchase their law practices. And as we're showing here, what's really on the mind of those would-be internal successors through their eyes as key employees is that they don't want to purchase their boss's law practice, and they really can't afford to purchase their boss's law practice either. And now let's look at that a different way. That is, for key employee lawyers whom senior attorneys hired X number of years ago, that is, the senior attorney hired their key employee lawyers because they needed lawyers to do the work. They needed someone, and attorneys that is, to do a job. And from those key employee lawyers' standpoint, they were hired to do a job. And what's important to them is that they maintain a reliable, predictable, and safe job. We actually point out here what we call the job security meter. That is, when the job for key employee lawyers is reliable, predictable, and safe, then they maintain their employment with the senior attorney-led law firm. As we're showing here, when a senior attorney at some point, based upon that assumption that their key employee lawyers really want to succeed to owning the law firm, and they make that announcement, and of course this happens with many of our clients that make the announcement, I'm considering to retire 6 months, a year from now, when the lease is going to terminate a year and a half from now. The hope and the assumption, and really the mistake to avoid by the senior attorney, is that their key employee lawyers are then going to step up and that they're going to want to purchase the firm. What happens with those key employee lawyers at that point, though, is that their RPS meter, their reliable, predictable, and safe job, goes from being in the green to going into the red. And what we find is that often they do not want to purchase the law firm. And when they find out that their boss is really serious about retiring, they're just going to look for another job and restore that all important RPS meter, that reliable, predictable, and safe job that the key employee lawyers want and need. And now let's look at that just a little bit differently. From the standpoint of avoiding the mistake that so many senior attorneys make about assuming that their key employee lawyers want to purchase their law firms, what we're showing here is just really 4 false expectations that debunk that assumption, that mistake. First and foremost is that your key employee lawyers, they wanted a job when you hired them, they still only want a job. They went to law school and not business school. That is, they're not entrepreneurs. They don't aspire to own a small business law firm. Next is that they just can't afford to purchase your law practice. They have so many other expenses going on in their lives, ranging from their mortgages to their own student loan debt to their monthly expenses, saving for retirement, saving for their kids' colleges. It's just a bridge too far to afford to purchase their boss's law practice. And then they just assume, typically, as your key employee lawyers, they just assume that the boss is never going to retire. So for today's buzzer beater, the top 5 mistakes to avoid before selling a law firm. For senior attorneys considering selling their law firms, there's really 5 top mistakes to avoid before selling your law firm. And those mistakes are as follows. Number one is to avoid waiting too long to sell. Now that we are in what we call the 3.0 digital era for law firms, where digital marketing is attracting clients to hire and retain lawyers and law firms, for those senior attorneys that are not adopting multi-channel digital marketing and they're waiting too long to sell their law practices, well, their all important books of business are not replenishing as much as they did in yesteryear. And if your book of business is not filled with clients, filled with referral sources, then your law firm is worth less and will become less valuable as you're not replenishing that book of business as much as you did in yesteryear. Second mistake to avoid is to assume that your internal successor, that is your key employee attorney or attorneys, want to purchase your practice. By and large, key employee lawyers, they just want a job. They were hired for a job. They want to continue having a job, and they often just can't afford to purchase your law firm. Third mistake to avoid is to underestimate Google for post 2020 business development. That is, just like we Google for everything and anything today outside of the legal industry. Well, guess what? Clients, would be clients, they're Googling for lawyers and law firms as well. And if you're not being found via a Google search, then you're not going to be hired. And if you're not going to be hired, then your short term revenues are going to go down, as is the overall value of your law firm. So, very important not to underestimate Google and to develop a presence on Google as well as multiple platforms of social media. Next, and the fourth mistake to avoid is not to overlook converting your subject matter knowledge into digital marketing that is digital content for digital marketing purposes. In today's 3.0 digital era, lawyers and law firms, we need to be publishing digital content on a regular basis because clients want to know, like, and trust the lawyers and law firms that they're considering hiring before they're even making a call. And they're avoiding yesteryear's word of mouth basis of picking up the phone or speaking with somebody at the gym, at work, at a ball game, asking, hey, who do you know? They're going straight to the internet and they're looking for lawyers whom they can know, like, and trust. Senior attorneys have developed treasure chests of subject matter knowledge in multiple practice areas ripe for converting into digital content for would-be clients to search, to review, and to know, like, and trust lawyers and law firms before contacting them to retain them. And the fifth of the top 5 mistakes to avoid before selling your law firm is to assume and hope, really, that tomorrow will continue to be like today. Well, change happens. We all know that. And in terms of selling a law firm, what we unfortunately see in the marketplace are the following 2 random Tuesdays. Random Tuesday number 1 is what happens when your key employee lawyer or key staff person on a random Tuesday gives you 2 or only 4 weeks notice before they leave. Focusing on the key employee lawyer, at that point, if a key employee lawyer or lawyers leave your firm in the short term, you're going to lose out on thousands, often tens of thousands of dollars of revenues, not just because they may be taking clients of the practice with them, but because they did the work to generate the revenues for the firm. Also, in terms of selling the law firm, buying firms want and need not only your book of business, but they want and need your experienced workforce, your key employee lawyers, and your key staff people. And if any of them leave on a random Tuesday, just makes your law practice less valuable in the short term and the long term. And the second random Tuesday, which is really a God forbid circumstance, is what happens if a senior attorney would be seller can no longer practice, either due to a physical or mental incapacity or premature death. In Law Firm Sales 1.0, which is the primary vehicle that we see in the marketplace for selling law firms, we need senior attorneys to transition their clients to the firms that they sell their law firms to because of the necessity of trust transfer. To realize the value of your law firm, senior attorneys often, pretty much every time, need to transfer the trust of their longtime clients to lawyers at the firms that they join as part of a sale. Well, if a senior attorney is not available to transfer the trust of their clients to a successor law firm, the value of the firm just plummets. And that is today's state of the market for law firm sales. And we recognize more than 11 minutes.